The 8 contenders for the new Rothenburg ob der Tauber.
Welcome to Searching for History.
Have you ever heard people talk about what is the new Prague? And the reason is Prague is so overrun by tourists these days compared to 20, 30 years ago. People are always like, well, is there something like Prague but isn't really on the tourist trail yet, like Krakow in Poland. I've heard people say, well, that's the new Prague. And I've been to Krakow, and I guess it could be a contender.
Over the years, we've noticed that Rothenburg ob der Tauber has become increasingly touristy. And so there are times that it's just packed with tourists and it's hard to find it very enjoyable.
Yeah, so we've been asking ourselves, what is the new Rothenburg? Is there a less touristed contender for what Rothenburg has to offer? So what does Rothenburg have to offer? It has a lot of pedestrian zones, so there's lots of places you can walk, where you don't have to worry about vehicle traffic. So it's pretty nice that way. Rothenburg has a really beautiful town square with restaurants and outdoor seating.
Rothenburg has a variety of museums. It offers walking tours, and there's quite a few really nice restaurants, including our favorite restaurant called Hell.
There's also a medieval torture museum. There's even another museum and an old monastery or convent, maybe a convent, that has a really nice arms and armor collection. One thing that Rothenburg has to offer is it has intact medieval and post-medieval architecture. So there's a lot of things there that date from really like the 1300s into the 1500s. It has an intact town wall that you can walk around. So most of it, I would say, 80% of it, you can actually walk the wall, which is pretty cool. It has that medieval charm, the half-timbered buildings that are just really cool. It has medieval churches and cathedrals there. And it's a stop on the Romantic Road, so if you're traveling the Romantic Road through Germany, it's one of those tourist sites that you're going to see.
It's also easy to find English speakers in Rothenburg, whether you're trying to make a lodging arrangement or ordering at a restaurant, trying to buy tickets at one of the museums. There's also a lot of cute window shopping opportunities, so it's a great place to buy souvenirs. There's a really cute Christmas shop that's attached to a Christmas museum. But you could buy all of your Christmas ornaments for your whole life at this Christmas shop.
We can think of 8 contenders that could be the new Rothenburg ob der Tauber. Number 1, Nuremberg. The first town that comes to mind is Nuremberg. The pros of Nuremberg. So there are charming parts of Nuremberg. There's a town wall with wall towers. It has museums, like an Imperial City Museum. Shopping, has restaurants. There is a castle, actually an imperial castle, one of the types of castles where when the emperor went from town to town, he would bring all of his stuff and fill the castle just, for the night or whatever and then move on. There's churches there, and it does have a charming town square.
The cons of Nuremberg are there's very little medieval architecture. Most of the old center was rebuilt after the war. Very little of the wall is actually walkable. It's not completely intact the way you would find in Rothenburg. And it's at the center of a large city.
Yeah, so Nuremberg is quite huge. And the very center of it is the original medieval town, with the walls. But it's a possible contender. Number 2, Meißen.
Another contender is Meißen. So the pros, the things that might make it a real contender is it has a charming atmosphere. It has a couple of museums, including the porcelain museum.
Meißen is the location where the famous Meißen porcelain has been manufactured.
It was the first European factory to figure out how to make porcelain that was comparable to what they were making in China. There's plenty of shopping. There's some nice restaurants, a castle, churches, and it has a really cute town square where when you're sitting on the town square, you can hear porcelain church bells from a nearby church, and that's quite charming.
And the castle there is pretty cool. In the castle courtyard is a cathedral church, and then the castle itself at some point became more of a palace, and so you can walk the different rooms and put on the fuzzy slippers and
And slide around.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
The cons of Meißen. There is not a lot of medieval architecture. In fact, most of Meißen is Baroque. There's no town wall, and really other than the castle, a cathedral, the Meißen factory and kind of retail outlet, and the town itself, there really isn't a lot of sightseeing opportunities. Number 3, Coburg.
Another really good contender is Coburg. And some of the pros of Coburg are it has a really charming atmosphere as well. I think it's the most beautiful town in Germany.
I think arguably it's the most beautiful town in Germany, for sure.
There's a really pleasant town square that's quite big. There's lots of sightseeing opportunities. So there's the palace in town, churches, and then there's the fortress on the top of the hill. There's a really beautiful pedestrian zone with lots of shopping, including window shopping. There's plenty of restaurants, and I think the Coburger Wurst is the best one in Germany.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Some of the cons, like the palace in town, there's no English tour, so if you take the tour, it's all in German. It's still worthwhile, but that's something to keep in mind. Another thing about Coburg is there's virtually no medieval or post-medieval architecture. It's all Baroque. Baroque's beautiful, but as a contender for Rothenburg, it just doesn't have that medieval charm. And there's no town wall. We did notice 2 original towers. Town wall towers are still there, but the wall itself is gone. I think it's been gone for a long time.
Yeah, I think so.
Number 4, Dinkelsbühl. The next contender for the new Rothenburg is Dinkelsbühl. Dinkelsbühl actually isn't very far from Rothenburg. It's on the Romantic Road, and it's quite the beautiful little town. It has a charming feel when you walk around in it. There is a town wall, and the wall is mostly intact, and it still has its towers and so forth. And parts of the wall are walkable. There is a couple of museums, there's shopping, there's restaurants, and then there is one cathedral and at least 1 or 2 small churches.
So some drawbacks, some cons to Dinkelsbühl is that the main square, or Marktplatz, isn't very big, and it has traffic driving through it. So that's not very quaint. There's not a lot of medieval architecture, so not many of the half-timbered buildings that you see in Rothenburg. And it doesn't feel very open or welcoming.
My experience walking around Dinkelsbühl is it's really more of a place where people live and less a tourist attraction. There's not really a lot to do there. There's traffic throughout the entire town, and I don't know the history of Dinkelsbühl exactly in regards to World War II, but I think it must have been bombed to some extent because it just doesn't have the half-timbered buildings that you would see or hope to see. It is a beautiful little town, but it just doesn't have those qualities that Rothenburg has. Number 5, Regensburg. All right, the next contender for the new Rothenburg is Regensburg. Regensburg has a pleasant and interesting atmosphere. There's lots of little town squares all over the place. I mean, I can think of 3 off the top of my head, 4 actually, one by the cathedral. There's all kinds of sightseeing opportunities. There's walking tours, churches throughout the city. There's a town hall. There's museums. And then many of these churches, and I think even the town hall, you can climb the tower and get a really wonderful panoramic view of the city. There's all kinds of shopping. You can actually buy dirndls and lederhosen in Regensburg, and there's all kinds of restaurants, ice cream shops. It's really a town that's set up to have a lot of tourists there.
Some of the cons of Regensburg is it really feels too big to be a close contender for Rothenburg.
Yeah, if you want to see all the sights in Regensburg, you will be walking quite a ways to see them all.
Yeah, and it's a stop for river cruise lines, so it has, I don't know if it has as many tourists as Rothenburg has, but it has a lot of tourists going through it. You'll see the cruise ships come in, and then everybody off boards, and they're all going on these different walking tours throughout the city. There's also not a lot of dedicated pedestrian zones, so there's lots of car traffic that you need to be mindful of, which makes it harder to relax and enjoy.
Number 6, Goslar. This next contender is Goslar, and I mean, I will tell you, I really loved Goslar. It's a great town to visit. It has a charming atmosphere. It has a really beautiful town square with a fountain in the middle. And that sunburst kind of detail that's in the cobblestones that kind of like emanates from the fountain and then fills the whole square. I mean, that's really spectacular. It's full of medieval and post-medieval architecture. I think it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and I think part of that is because of the amount of half-timbered buildings that's in Goslar. There's a lot of pedestrian zone there. You can just freely walk the town and not have to worry about traffic. Of course, there's tons of shopping and restaurants. It's a pretty spectacular town.
Which brings us to the cons of Goslar, and there's really only one. It doesn't have a medieval town wall the way that Rothenburg does. Aside from that, there's just not a lot of drawbacks to it.
Yeah. Also, one thing, the sightseeing opportunities, there's a lot. The churches, the Kaiser Palace, it's a medieval palace where the emperor once lived. I really can't think of a lot of cons, and I mean, arguably, it's a really good contender for the new Rothenburg. Number 7, Quedlinburg. So the next town, and it's a really spectacular town, is Quedlinburg. It has a charming atmosphere. It has the medieval and post-medieval architecture. In fact, Quedlinburg is another one of these UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it's because of the number of half-timbered buildings. It has shopping. It has actually a magnificent square right there in the middle of town, and then restaurants. It has the most incredible church you're going to find in Germany. It's a Romanesque church. In fact, the crypt of the church still has medieval frescoes. It really is awesome, the true definition of the word. I mean, I love that church. And while it doesn't have a castle, it has kind of a castle church. In fact, that's where this Romanesque church is. It's inside the castle. Yeah, Quedlinburg is an awesome place. I really love it. In fact, we've been there twice.
Some of the cons of Quedlinburg, though, is that it doesn't have a town wall. There's very little English spoken at restaurants and hotels. There's not a lot of places to stay, and there's not a lot of restaurants. There's several right on that main square that are quite good, but it doesn't have a lot.
Quedlinburg is awesome, but it's missing some of those crucial elements. I didn't notice that there was even a museum there.
The only museum that I remember is right in that Romanesque church. There's like a little church museum, but it's very small.
And number 8, Bamberg.
So the last contender that we have for Rothenburg is Bamberg. Some of the pros is that it has a charming atmosphere. There's something on offer there called smoky beer, which we'll get into more.
Which maybe is a con.
We're not
in
sure.
my opinion.
There's medieval and post-medieval architecture. There's incredible churches, shopping, restaurants, and nice hotels.
It's a really beautiful town, and it definitely has the half-timber architecture. But the cons, well, for one thing, the smoky beer, I personally thought was awful.
Yeah, now I like beer, but I'm not a dark beer drinker, and that smoky beer has a really obvious smoke flavor. Maybe if you like that, then you'll like the smoky beer.
So another con of Bamberg is, while there is medieval and post-medieval architecture, it's mixed with Baroque. So it's not a pure half-timbered town. There's no town wall. And there is a castle, but it's a little over a mile walk from the city center uphill to the castle, so it's not exactly nearby. But it's a beautiful town. I suppose another con for it is it's also a stop by river cruises, and so you'll get people leaving the cruise ships and going throughout the town. So there is quite a few tourists there. Is there a new Rothenburg Ob Tauber? What do you think, Erin?
I think that the best contender for the new Rothenburg is Coburg. And I think that because it's the most beautiful city in Germany. There's lots of window shopping. It's a really walkable town. It has a really inspiring atmosphere. So it's not just charming, but it's also, it feels very forward moving in a way. There's a palace, castle, and a church. There's lots of ice cream shops, restaurants, and I think that the Coburger Wurst is the best one. Right on the town square, they have a little Wurst stand, and you can always get Coburger Wurst there.
Yeah, and you can smell it from a long ways away because of the smoke kind of wafting out of the stand. It's and then don't forget there's that really beautiful park that leads up to the fortress.
To the fortress. And it's interesting to look into the history of the development of that park. And it's a beautiful walk up to the fortress because you walk through this park.
The park was actually designed to emulate the English countryside.
Yeah, so a natural English countryside. While it's very intentional and landscaped, as you progress up through it and go back down it, you get this very like romantic, idyllic feeling.
Pastoral
setting, yeah.
Is there a new Rothenburg? If I was to pick one, I would have to say Goslar is a really good contender. It's just full of history and half-timbered buildings, and it's a really wonderful town. But there's a reason we keep going back to Rothenburg, and I think it's because it really is a gem of a medieval town, and I don't think you can really replace it. Despite the tourists, it's just so incredible.
I think it's better to just try as hard as you can to kind of work around the tourist season and the kind of times when tour buses come into the town. So if you stay in the town, you'll be able to enjoy it in the evenings. And if you stay during shoulder season, there's a little less tourists.
Yeah, right. In the spring or the fall. And the evenings for sure. Everyone drives away and then it's just the people staying in Rothenburg at that point. I personally don't think there is a new Rothenburg.
I still think that Coburg could be the new Rothenburg.
That's our video on the new Rothenburg Ob der Tauber.
Do you have any other contenders for what would be the new Rothenburg? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, if you've been somewhere else in Germany and you think there is a spectacular town that kind of has all those features, let us know. We would love to go there.
Don't forget to like, share, comment on this video, and please subscribe to Searching for History.
Thanks for watching.